So, man, my office looks horrible. I need to clean this up if this is going to be a place that. So, so this is RetroCultCast. It's a podcast that my wife Nicole and I are doing, and we both are really into genre fiction. I actually, with a few friends, have started some genre magazines. One of which is Witch House, an amateur magazine of cosmic horror, and we have an author with us, someone who we published, who's published, not just in Witch House and in several other magazines, Michael Burke. And one of my favorite stories from our third issue of Witch House is his The October Path. So I thought we could just talk to Michael about his writing and specifically that story, but also his writing in general. I know you're a sword and sorcery and fantasy writer as well. So
Yes.
thanks for doing
Yeah.
this.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for liking that story.
Yeah. Do you want to do any introductions, Nicole?
I'm the same person I was on the last episode,
That's
and I forgot to mention without Jason's prompting that I am a poetry reader for Witch House. So yeah, it's been nice getting to read more of the fiction because it's not something that I tend to focus on. My own writing tends to be more poetry driven, though I am trying to do more fiction myself. So I'm really looking forward to talking with Michael tonight. Maybe getting some advice or tips on how to write good horror fiction.
mm-hmm.
Do you want to start, Jay, or do you want me to kick off the questions?
You start.
Okay. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as a writer. So, how long have you been writing? Have you attended writing workshops or conventions? And have you had any formal academic training in writing?
Um, I have been writing in some form or another pretty much since I was 6 years old. Um, I found a stash of my dad's old pulp novels from when he was in the service at a very young age, and it left an indelible impression upon me. Mainly those frenetic, like Frank Frazetta covers. And that's what drove me to teach myself how to read. And from there, I wanted to create my own stories in that vein. Um, but I suffer from ADHD and kind of slipped under the radar my whole life. It was about 6, 7 years ago that I was diagnosed, and then just like everything, like why I couldn't finish writing something beyond scribbling in notebooks just fell into place, kind of like the end of the Sixth Sense.
Hmm.
It all just hit me, and now I write, and whatever success I've enjoyed is because of sticking to a schedule.
Hmm.
Um, I have not taken any formal training, not gone to any classes or conventions or workshops. I just am kind of regurgitating what I've enjoyed reading my whole life, and I wear my influences pretty plainly on my sleeve. I think. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think that you have a novel writing style, particularly your sword and sorcery. So, and uh, October Path. It was. I'm trying to think if I can identify any clear influences. Um, I mean, it seemed pretty novel to me. What did you think, Nicole?
Well, now that you said that you,
Maybe some Stephen King. I'll show.
yeah, Stephen King. That's who I was just thinking.
Thank you. I mean, we all kind of want to write like Uncle Steve. Um, it Sure. It was actually I created that story from a personal experience,
Hmm.
There's a
but
question later on that will ask you about the kind of the inspiration for the story. So we could jump there now, or
The reason why I say, but before we jump there, the reason why I say Stephen King is because there's a big component of this story that has like almost like a fever dream, like a phantasmagoria, where like you don't know if the character's like hallucinating or dreaming, or if it's actually supernatural, and that felt very Stephen King esque to me. But I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
You were talking, Nicole. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say, if Michael, if you felt like talking about the inspiration of the story now, we could go ahead and just kind of segue into that, or we can kind of hold off and get there when we get to that question. It's really up to you.
Sure. I mean, that's a little bit of a byproduct of my ADHD is I'll move on tangents a lot, which does make writing sometimes difficult because I'll jump ahead in my own story and then I will backpedal and fill in the blanks and then I'll rewrite it all.
Yeah. No, that's really I think it's wonderful that you're so open about talking about that. This is a little tangent on my own. I teach a tutoring training class for students who want to work in the writing center that I direct. And we read an essay from a writing center practitioner who talked about his struggles with ADHD and what it was like to be a writer with ADHD, and then how to tutor writers as a tutor with ADHD. And that was something that I know a lot of the students, especially those who were not who have not been diagnosed with ADHD, which I am not, diagnosed with that. But it was very enlightening to read about like how this author needed to create certain circumstances and then the actual process, because we talk a lot about like writing process in general, but then to hear about this person's writing process as a writer with ADHD. And then we talked about like, well, how do we help writers with ADHD? Because a lot of our students come in with that diagnosis as well. So it was a really fascinating read and discussion. And I think it's wonderful to have authors be very open and candid about their experiences, writing as a person with ADHD. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I mean, for me, having having guidelines, like a deadline for an open call helps keep me on track to get something finished or sticking to the schedule that I make for myself. It's all about creating, again, just for me, but creating patterns and sticking to them and not letting myself lose focus. Uh, and that's with things like not having my phone near me when I write, not having social media open when I write on my computer. Anything that can distract me will distract me. So I need to remain focused.
Yeah. Oh, I love deadlines or this setting aside writing time. It's really hard for me to stick to it, but like having like a designated 1 hour every morning to write. It's when I was working on my academic book, I basically had to do that. I was making progress, and it was
Mm-hmm.
so so yeah. How about this next question? You know what, Nicole? Do you mind asking the questions, because I'm recording my display now, and if I tab over to the questions, then everyone will see the.
Ah,
Okay, so
that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, we had some technical difficulties. It took us some time to troubleshoot tonight, so we don't
Pay
want to
no
disrupt.
attention.
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't want to disrupt this fragile balance that we've achieved.
yeah.
A man
So,
behind the curtain.
yeah. So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you like to write cosmic horror?
Um, honestly, I mean, when I was devouring my father's pulp novels, I of course read the Lovecraft. Um, I might have been a little too young for Lovecraft at the time. I was definitely still single digits, and
Oh my gosh.
I've revisited maybe the last time was God 20 something years ago. Um, but when I submitted to you for Whetstone and saw that there was Witch House for issue 2, I believe I submitted, and I wanted to try my hand at it. Like, I don't feel I have a handle on cosmic horror, but the themes of it resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written a couple of stories, and I honestly am still trying to get a handle on it, but I like that challenge. It also helps with my focus
Mm-hmm.
in trying to write cosmic horror. And I'm learning that it's a broader field in which to play and write than I initially thought. Like, I did that first story, I felt I kind of fell into the stereotypes of cosmic horror, tentacles. Um, but October Path, I think I broke that mold a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking forward to trying my hand at more.
Yeah, I think H.P. Lovecraft in his essay, the supernatural horror in literature, he talks about he's using the term supernatural horror to talk about the kind of writing that he likes, um, but he makes the case that it's more atmospheric than like plot driven, and I think in October Path there is really a lot of atmosphere, like it's just I was reading it I think in late September. I forget when the reading period was, and yeah, it was either in September or in August. I was preparing for the Halloween season, and it really got me, quote unquote, like into the spirit of Halloween. You know, like it was very autumnal, and
Thank you.
you have the references to the when he's in the hospital, he's looking at the decorations. The bats. We've all seen those bats and witches cutouts that are, for
Yeah,
some reason they still stick around.
that's another thing I do when I write that helps ground me in my stories is I try to access a character's five senses and not just one or two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm still playing around with that to, you know, varying degrees of success.
Yeah. Oh, definitely like olfactory. I got that the mold and the leaves and
Mm-hmm.
kind of the fall scents. It was part of that story. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So the next question, what do you think makes a story scary, and how do you frighten or disturb your readers?
I think for a story to be scary, there needs to be some manner of personal stake. The character has to somehow be invested in the events and or the characters that they're playing off of. Um, and then we as writers can can build the action, the conflict around character. Character has to be first. I'm learning. I mean, I'm a very plot driven writer and I'm still feeling out character, but I think you need that personal aspect to make a story scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll try to unsettle myself when I'm getting to the conclusion of something I write, and hopefully that transfers as scary, unsettling, what have you, for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. I know that in several writing books that have prompts, I've seen that variation. Write a poem about something that scares you, or write this story about a fear that you have. So if you can like draw on what personally might be disturbing to you, it's likely that that will translate a little bit more viscerally to readers as well, and it's likely that somebody else is going to have that same fear, or that that same kind of like reaction to an idea, or like a description that would be unsettling in some way.
Yeah, I think sometimes maybe keeping it simple, like in the October Path, it's all about, like, what I tried to focus on was the toenail.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's scary. I mean, it's kind of horrifying. Um, and you could, or I could have just really leaned into being ultra descriptive about that scene. But if there was no personal stake, um, who cares about the guy's toenail? Um, you have to feel something for this person, and it doesn't have to be a favorable emotion or connection to a character. It just has to be a relatable character, even if they have, unsavory habits or characteristics, what have you.
It's interesting because I would describe your story. I know people talk about body horror and they use it to talk about film rather than fiction prose, but I feel like this is a form of body horror. Like it's an infection story, and then what I think is the way body horror works is like we all have bodies. We all can relate to like this and that experience, and like
Mm-hmm.
getting sick and going and having delirium and like I remember I'm trying to think like you know it's probably like really common to like when you slam your hand in a door or something, you get the like your fingernail gets dark and maybe it falls. I have my little brother when he growing up he caught his hand in a car door and his nail fell out. So we all like have these things just being human, having bodies, and it's gross and it creeps us out. And I,
Yeah, bodies are gross.
yeah, they are.
Which I am very grateful you didn't lean more into that descriptive moment, because even though I like body horror, um, I had to skim that because it was like so like I could feel it and I was very disturbed by it. So thank you for not being more descriptive there.
Sure. I think restraint is is a strong thing.
Mm-hmm.
Holding back is stronger than just letting it all hit the page. You know, whatever somebody imagines from a prompt that you write to and give them is going to be more horrifying to that individual than whatever you can craft, regardless of how in depth it can be.
That's totally true. Now you're making me think of uh, The Fly with Jeff Goldblum is pulling off his fingernails.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would look at the cinematography, but I'm sure the camera doesn't linger on that for a long time. You would just kind of become desensitized to it. It's just like a quick shot and then moving on, because then
Yeah.
you have it echoing in your mind.
Okay, so the next question, what do you hope readers take away from your writing?
I hope they enjoy it. I think every writer suffers from an imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I do. I'm still astonished and grateful that I've been published these past couple of years. Um, I think I've learned more about the craft from that first story, which you actually published. So thank you.
The Ahanu Foxcloud story.
Yeah,
That was the very first one where he encounters the dog spirit.
on the hill, the
Yeah,
spirit on the hill,
yeah, yeah. What's the name of that story?
the spirit on the hill.
Spirit on the Hill, and that's in Whetstone uh,
3.
3. Whetstone 3. Everyone should read that one too.
Oh, thanks.
This is a good story. Your
Thank you.
dialogue's great, by the way.
Oh, I feel that's my
Really,
worst writing tool that I need to work on. But
I
thank
think
you.
there wasn't a lot of dialogue in October of Path, but there is a lot of dialogue in your Sword and Sorcery Tales, and I feel like it's very economic and you know um, the characters don't say a lot, but what they say it serves a function. So
what I love about the Whetstone and Witch House is that word limit, that 2,500 word limit. Like that, you as a writer need to you need to it has to be all meat, no gristle. It's a good test.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we can actually get to the question that you kind of previewed for us a moment ago. So, can you speculate about the source of your story? And do you have any creative influences or favorite writers? And you've already talked a little bit about both of these, but any more details that you want to share or examples
Sure.
that you want to
Specifically
share?
about this story.
This story um, I took from a personal experience. I I had actually woken up one morning with a sore toe, and it was a little red. And my wife, then girlfriend at the time, we were living together, and I was just like, my toe really hurts, and I'm like, can you take me like to the doctor? I'm like, I don't even think I can drive.
Oh my gosh.
Um, so she brought me to my primary care, um, and there was a doctor on call, and they were just like, think you have some kind of an infection. I don't know what it is, but if there's a if you notice a red line like emanate from your toe where it hurts, she drew with a marker on my foot. Like if you notice any red line or something red, move past this marker line, go immediately to the ER.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And a couple hours later, like she gave me some, she prescribed some antibiotics. Um, and I'm like, okay. So sitting around, toe, foot wasn't feeling better. And I noticed red moving past that line. And I'm just
Oh,
like, honey, we got to go to the ER. And so she drove me, and they put me on an IV. Um, and after some investigation, they they determined that it was cellulitis, and they needed to stop it before it reached my lymph nodes, or it was going to be bad. And they couldn't find the source, and it turned out the source was under my big toenail.
oh my gosh.
Um, so while there were some podiatrists there, like I'm just hooked up, I'm on a gurney, they're talking. Apparently the podiatrist asked if they're like, we're gonna take your toenail off, but if do you want a local? I didn't hear him, and I just went no.
Oh gosh.
And I remembered him looking at me quizzically and my wife looking at me, and then he just proceeded. And then I got really queasy.
This sounds like.
This is a horror right here. You didn't need to add anything else.
Yeah.
And
You could have written this as a memoir.
and yeah, my wife noticed, like she's like, "Are you okay? You look really green." And I'm like, "I need to lay back." Um, but I was also fascinated in watching what was happening. Um, but I didn't get sick. But the that was some wild pain. Um, Now I understand why like bamboo shoots under fingernails is torture. Um, so that was the inspiration for my story. I just kind of added a little, you know, little supernatural element to it.
I can't. By the way, that was probably one of the coolest biographical inspiration for a story I've ever heard. So that's awesome. uh, you gosh, I'm such a nerd. I don't know why I'm asking this. There's a goblin and there's a toadstool. Was that just mythology, or were you actually citing like the night goblins from Warhammer? Because the
I am
night goblins, they're like they always before they attack a city. There's toadstools, and they are I don't know. I shouldn't
I
even ask
am
that question.
I sell Warhammer in my shop.
Yeah.
I've never played
Okay.
Warhammer,
Okay.
so no.
I did not think. I did not
Um,
think that was a reference. But
but I think, I mean, people take away from a writer's story what they take away. You know, it might not be what I intended, but that doesn't make, that reader's experience any less valid, because we all have different experiences in our lives and we all see things through a different perspective. And I mean, that's why art should be appreciated, because it's subjective.
yeah, yeah, my brain is pickled from reading too much Warhammer fiction. So I see
That's
it.
that's one nerddom I've never gotten into, but I am curious.
Okay. Yeah.
So we mentioned Stephen King and you talked about Lovecraft. Are there other writers that you feel like have been very inspirational for you as a writer yourself?
Um, Absolutely. Robert E. Howard is probably my biggest inspiration, because it was my dad's Conan books
Mhm.
that captured my attention at that young age. So much so that, like, over my shoulder is my Robert E. Howard bookshelf. I keep it near my desk where I write as inspiration. I try to keep the things that inspire me around my desk while I'm writing. Like I've got like a little Frankenstein head.
Nice.
Uh, and another big, inspiration would be Edgar Rice Burroughs, um, Hemingway,
Mhm.
uh, Chandler.
Oh yeah.
Uh, a lot of the second wave of comic book writers
Mhm.
from the 1970s, like Steve Gerber, Steve Englehart, Don McGregor,
Mhm.
because what helped me read my dad's pulp novels was comic books. It was, my dad fostered my love of reading, or my burgeoning love of reading, by getting me a handful of comic books way back when, almost 50 years ago now.
Mhm.
And then a second passion grew, and a lot of those comic book writers influenced how I write.
Mhm. That's intriguing. When you mentioned Chandler, I think that your dialogue is really, that resonates with me when you said Chandler. Like hard boiled
Yeah,
dialogue, it tends to be very functional. Like it's not just characterization. It's not just telling you who this person is. It's like also moving the story forward. In the October Path specifically, there's that where you where I forget his name. Don't tell me Simon.
Simon.
Simon. Oh, dang it! I remembered.
No, you said it at the same time I said it.
Okay. Simon, he's kind of in this delirium. He just tells the doctors to just fix me up after they're trying to describe to him. Like that was like a very cool moment. You learn about Simon, but you're also you also know that he's in a difficult state. He can't really respond to them in this. Anyhow, um,
thank you.
yeah.
Okay, so our last set of questions. Do you have any general advice for readers who are considering getting into writing themselves? And how do you go from a writer curious person to an actual writer?
Writer curious. um, well, I guess I was writer curious. I would say read for sure. Read what you want to write. And then from there, write, just do it. Write like you. Um, you can read the how-to books and go ahead and do it. Just absorb as much information that's out there that you can, but I would say find a community of writers as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fortunate to be in New England where there's a large horror community, large horror writer community, and horror writers are some of the friendliest people you'll ever meet.
I
You
agree.
know,
I agree with that. It's very strange.
and they'll and just go to signings, events where these people congregate and make friends with them. Don't socially climb. Don't try to get them to you know get you on a fast track or a shortcut. Just be genuine. Tell them that you like their stuff or that you don't like their stuff. I mean, constructive criticism is great. Everybody, like I said, has that imposter syndrome, and they wanna know that they can get better, and if there's something they wrote and published that you didn't like, that's just as valuable as saying that you loved it and leaving a 5-star review or whatever it is. But immerse yourself in all of this if you want to write.
That's really intriguing. That point about uh, you know, I don't know, if, like negative's not the right word. Constructive feedback. That can be just as much as a compliment as like this was the greatest story. Like you know, first off, if it's constructive feedback, it tends to be very specific, and you're letting the person know that you've read closely and you've thought deeply about something they've written. That's like the best thing that you can do, irrespective of if you liked it or not. It's like you've actually, I've it if somebody has read this. It's not just been this like academic exercise that I'm doing on my own. So
Right. Something when Nicole asked earlier if I'd ever had any writing training
mm-hmm.
or stuff like that. When I was getting started writing and sending out to some calls and learning about my ADHD and how to buckle down, I I came across the idea of creating a writing group.
Mm-hmm.
So I found area writers and had the group, and it went through many iterations, but the purpose of that, the ultimate goal of it was to force me into writing on a regular schedule. Like we would meet once a month, and then we would read each other's stories. And then it evolved into reading your own story via Zoom when the pandemic was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then sit quietly while every other member of the group offered constructive criticism. And it was an exercise for both the writer and the reader. Like and this was from other writers that I knew. They said, sit quietly, don't defend your work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural instinct to just get defensive and just be like, well, this is what I meant. And I enforced sitting back, staying quiet while the other group member said what they had to say. And you could respond after that,
Mm-hmm.
but you had to sit through each person's review of your story, and it was an exercise for all involved. And I learned that from my fellow writers.
Yeah, no, that's a great practice. When I teach creative writing, and then the poetry group that I have not been super engaged with lately, but that I'm I have been in the past and will be in the future again. We do the same practice where you read your work and then you let everyone else speak. Or in the case of my students, I give like a certain amount of time for everyone to speak, and then I tell my students, I'm like, okay, you can respond. I also think it's important to not apologize for your work, which is something that a lot of my students tend to default into with creative work, or honestly even with their academic writing. They're like, well, I'm very sorry about this, it's not very good. And I'm like, you should never say that. Because
Hmm.
what are you immediately putting in the minds of your readers? That this is not going to be good, right? And then so the way that I try to teach it, and what I try to remember myself, is that you're here because you're trying to improve the writing. The writing is not done. I also just teach in general that writing is probably never really done, that you can always keep working on something. You just have to decide as a writer that you're just finished working on that thing. It's good enough, is how I always tell my students. I'm like, you'll reach a point where you decide it's good enough.
Hmm.
And to help you get to good enough, you need other writers, you need other readers providing you feedback, and you need to be open to hearing that feedback. So having a community, I think, is so important and so vital. And I think it's why a lot of people maybe never write the way that they would love to. It's difficult to put your work out there, and sometimes it's difficult to find people that you trust to give your work to, and hear that feedback from.
Yeah, if there's definitely been instances in my past where I've managed to finish something and wanted an extra pair of eyes on it, and I did not get constructive feedback.
Mhm.
And it made me retreat.
Mm.
It's really, I mean, it's hard to put yourself out there as a writer, and to try to tap into something really personal.
Mm.
I know I struggle with it, and can always get better. I mean, no one's perfect at crafting, you know, the ultimate story.
Mm. Yeah. You guys are making me think of all the times I've taught creative writing seminars, and we have the cone of silence rule. And there's that one writer who just will not respect the cone of silence rule, like they can't help themselves. Um,
Yeah.
but well, cool. Uh, so I guess the last thing would be what are some other projects that you're currently working on? Is there anything that you want to bring to others' attentions? Like, I still haven't read your. You have an Ahanu Foxcloud anthology now from Tool Frog Press. Is
Tool fog.
yeah,
Yeah.
Tool Fog. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that came out earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I Yeah, I've got a few things out with Tool Fog.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, the Ahanu is that's a 6-story collection, 3 brand new stories. I've got a weird western from Tool Fog.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've got the comic artist Dan Brereton.
Uh-huh.
He did the Nocturnals, and I mean he's done every major comic publisher since the '90s.
Oh wow.
He did a Sword and Sorcery Kickstarter, and I was fortunate to get invited to that. And I had an Ahanu story in there with some of my friends that I have learned a lot from.
What's that anthology called? I'm not familiar with that one.
It's called Swordplay.
Okay. Oh, I've seen that. That really beautiful cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like an orange cover,
Yeah.
and a woman warrior like standing in profile, just
Yeah.
kind of holding her sword in 2 hands.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I got a I'm looking at my brag shelf. I'm like, I've got a military horror
Oh.
that came out from Screaming Banshee Press.
Hmm.
Uh, that's more of a historical fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm enjoying those characters. I'm actually writing a story right now. I have to get submitted before the end of the month. Um, and I'm always working on Ahanu stories. I went after Beneath Ceaseless Skies with the newest one I wrote, but they turned me down. And while we had our technical difficulties, I had a rejection come in.
Oh man.
Oh no.
But that's all right. I don't take them personal unless
Mhm.
they make it personal. I've only had that once. I keep a spreadsheet of my submissions and how it all works, and that helps with my ADHD is just having a spreadsheet. Um, and so then, like, if something goes wrong, like this one publisher just sent a really unprofessional and like a personal attack rejection, and I had no idea where that was coming from. So I just, in my notes column in the spreadsheet, I just, make a note of it and just like, well, that's a blacklist.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Get some.
Otherwise it's just business. It's
Yeah.
like every story has a home. It's just a matter of finding the right home.
Mhm.
So, I mean, anyone who would be listening, just keep writing. I mean, sometimes it takes 6 times or it takes 17 times, but keep hacking away.
Yeah. I submit for rejection. So when you get an acceptance, you're surprised. Like you just submit the assumption that that's how I rationalize it. So,
Yeah, I try to make sure I send out at least 2 stories a month.
well, that's good. That's that's very productive from my point of view.
I feel like I'm making up for lost time.
Mhm. Well, do you have any last questions, Nicole?
No.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. This was a lot of fun, and learned a lot about that story and about the background. It was October Path in issue 3 of Witch House, and several. Actually, there are 2 other Ahanu stories in Whetstone, right? Michael.
You have published 4
Four.
Ahanu
Oh,
stories,
okay.
and there's a 5th coming, I
Okay.
believe.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No. So there's plenty of Michael Burke fiction out there to be read, and the Witch House story is free, and I'll link to the Whetstone too. I'll link to the PDF if people. I'm assuming people who watch this have probably read the story already, but if not,
One
then
can only hope.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad to be counted with all my fellow authors in that. They've all been wonderful stories. I'm self-deprecating. I'm like, I'm so lucky.
I think we are too. I mean, it's been a lot of fun doing these amateur zines, and specifically with people like you who you said I published your first story. I mean I thought it was excellent. And that was the beginning of this whole adventure for you. So yeah.
It was, thank you. In my introduction in the Tool Fog Ahanu anthology, I thank you.
Oh well, I need to get a copy of that. I think it's on my Amazon wish list. So
Well, guess what you're getting for
there
Christmas?
you go. There you go. Completely separate conversation, but there's so much new sword and sorcery out there. It's hard to like. I used to be able to just it would come out and I would read it and it'd be I had to read everything and it's so much now. So
I've learned hanging around with so many writers that we support each other.
mm-hmm.
I think by purchasing each other's works, but it's so hard to find the time to read it.
Yeah.
It's a balance I've yet to strike.
Yeah.
I mean, I have books that I've bought like directly from an author at a convention
Mm-hmm.
and like 5 years ago, and I still haven't read it. I need to. I'm like, because my time is regimented between my shop, like putting in my shop time, and then my downtime away from the shop. I'm like, I have to write.
Yeah.
because that's the schedule I made. But I also need to balance that time with reading,
Mm-hmm.
so I can continue to learn from others' voices and just be inspired in a different way.
Yeah. Got to sharpen the saw or return to the spring, whatever your metaphor is. See?
They all work.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason, Nicole.
Thank you, Michael.